Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new year of Edpuzzle lecture notes on your computers. We're now going into the energy unit of biology, which is basically photosynthesis and cellular respiration. Those are the two main energy processes that occur within living organisms. Now, remember, life on Earth, all the energy inside life, at least by far the most of the energy, starts off in the sun. It's that energy from the sun, light energy, travels to Earth, and it is able to be used by plants or autotrophs. Remember, plants are things that can make their own food within their own cells. So the plants use that energy from sunlight. Then they also take in H2O or water, and they take in CO2 or carbon dioxide from the air. And they're able to use that, the CO2 and the water and the sunlight, to make glucose sugar. Glucose. And it has the formula of, and start remembering this, C6, so it has 6 carbon atoms, H12, it's got 12 hydrogens, and O6. C6H12O6, that's the chemical formula for glucose. So that process of plants making glucose, using the energy from the sun to make glucose sugar, that's photosynthesis. Now, we got our glucose, but even though we can eat this and eventually it can be used as energy, first it needs to be converted into a molecule that can be used as an immediate source of energy. And that molecule is called ATP, or adenosine triphosphate. And the process of converting glucose and converting it into useful ATP molecules, well, that's cellular respiration. So in photosynthesis, we make glucose, plants make glucose, and in respiration, you convert glucose into ATP, molecules that can be used immediately for energy. All right, so now our daily objective. So after this little Edpuzzle lecture, you should definitely know what ATP is, adenosine triphosphate. And it is, remember, it's a molecule that can store and release energy. It can be used as energy. So you should know how ATP can store and how it can release energy within living things. All right, so ATP in the cell's energy. Remember, adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, that's the energy-rich molecule. That's the main molecule that is used in order to release energy. So whenever cells need energy, they get it from ATP. Now, energy is basically just the ability to do work. So in case you didn't know it, even if you're sitting there doing absolutely nothing, the cells within your body are still working. They still need energy. The muscles in your heart, they require energy. Your cells need energy if you move, to transport substances across the cell membrane. Remember, that's for moving from low concentration to high concentration. That requires energy. To break down large, say, like food molecules, or to build new molecules, like maybe build new proteins. All that requires energy. So your cells need a constant supply of this molecule called ATP that is used by the cells for energy. All right, so now where do these cells get the energy that they need? Remember, cells need the energy molecule ATP. Well, where does it come from? Well, first, remember, for the most part, all energy inside living things on Earth, the energy originates in the sun. The sun's light travels to Earth, and it is captured by plants, which take in CO2 and water, H2O, and they use the energy from light to make food. So these tortilla chips, those are plants. The energy in those chips began in the sun. Same thing with the apple. Now, I know cows are not made from the sun, but cows eat grass, which then the energy in the grass gets stored in like the cow's tissues and also its milk. So we get food basically from the sun. The energy from the sun is stored in food, whether it's plants or animals. Well, that food can get broken down into a sugar molecule called glucose. That's also the molecule that plants make, the sugar molecule that it makes. And then the glucose, through cellular respiration, can be used to make ATP. Remember, ATP is the molecule that is the main source of energy for living things. All right, so now ATP, or adenosine triphosphate. In case you didn't know, tri means 3. Anytime you see tri, it always means 3. So if you rode a tricycle to school today, that tricycle would have 3 wheels because tri means 3. So this is kind of what ATP looks like up here in the top right. So it's got adenosine. That's where it gets the name adenosine. It's got an adenosine molecule bonded to 1, 2, 3 phosphate molecules. So that's why it's called adenosine triphosphate. It's got an adenine bonded to 1, 2, 3 phosphates. That's what makes ATP adenosine triphosphate. Now in this ATP molecule up here, where is the energy stored? Energy is stored in the chemical bonds between the phosphates. So the energy is stored right there in that bond between the 2 phosphates. So to release energy, all that happens is that bond right here gets broken. This 3rd phosphate floats off and energy is released. All right, so here's ATP up here. Remember, that's the molecule that can be used by cells for energy. So here it goes. ATP is getting used here by a cell. The cell needs energy for something, and the cell is using the ATP. Now, remember, in order for ATP to release its energy, all that happens is this 3rd phosphate right here on the ATP breaks off, and energy is released for the cell. Well, now, that original ATP molecule doesn't have 3 phosphates anymore. Since one of them was ripped off, now it's only going to have 2 phosphate groups. So it's going to look kind of like this now. So it's going to have an adenine bonded to a phosphate, bonded to a phosphate, but only 2. 1, 2. So now it's no longer adenosine triphosphate. It now becomes adenosine diphosphate. So ATP is kind of like your cell phone in first period. Fully charged, ready to go, has plenty of energy. Now ADP is kind of like your cell phone in 7th period. This is where it's on like 5%. It's basically dead. Your phone is worthless. But you don't throw your phone away. Because just like your cell phone, ADP down here, adenosine diphosphate, it can be recharged and used again. Through cellular respiration, using glucose, it can add another phosphate to convert ADP and turn it back into ATP. So basically that's what respiration is. So you have your ADP, it's like a dead battery, a phone that needs to be charged. All you got to do, cellular respiration, you eat some sort of food, and the energy from that food is used to add another phosphate to that ADP to turn it back into ATP. And time for a brain break. So here's your riddle of the day. What kind of room has no windows and no doors? So what kind of room has no windows and no doors? See if you can get it. And the answer, of course, is a mushroom. And once again, remember here, the energy molecule that can be used immediately by your cells for energy is ATP. ATP. Remember, the energy in this molecule is stored in the bonds between the phosphates. So whenever your cells need energy, they take ATP, they break that bond between the last two phosphates, it releases energy, and that molecule now becomes ADP because it no longer has 3 phosphates, it now has 2. Di means 2. So this is like a dead battery over here, ADP, but if you eat food through cellular respiration, your mitochondria recharge the ADP, adds another phosphate, and it returns back to ATP where its energy can be released again. And a little bit more about ATP. Basically, it's the same thing. So what happens when a cell needs to use energy? What does it do? Well, it breaks off. A phosphate group is broken off of the ATP to make ADP. So that energy has been used. A phosphate has been broken off, and that energy from the bond was released. So that ADP, you don't throw it away. When you want to store energy, when your cells need to store energy, a phosphate group is added to the ADP. So it had 2 adenosine diphosphate. Well, it adds 1 to make an adenosine triphosphate again, ATP. Now there's some other energy-rich molecules. ATP is by far the most important, but these guys are used to kind of transfer energy, and basically they transfer electrons. You're going to need to know them. For this photosynthesis one, we're going to start with this, NADPH. And in respiration, there's going to be 2 more. It's NADH and FADH2. What does it stand for? You don't need to know it. If you want to know, come ask me. But anyways, what these guys do, they carry hydrogen. Basically, they carry protons, hydrogen ions. And they also, more importantly, carry high energy electrons. So these 3 molecules right here, NADH, FADH2, and NADPH, just know they carry hydrogen, and they also carry high energy electrons. And those electrons can be used to create more energy, because that's all electricity is. It is a flow of electrons, and those electrons can be used to produce other forms of energy. So as far as these 3 different molecules, NADH, FADH2, and NADPH, just think of them like little bags that carry electrons. And real quick, a little review from way back in biochemistry. Remember, reactants are what go into a chemical reaction, and the products are what gets made. So, we're going to be doing photosynthesis. So here's the chemical formula or equation for photosynthesis. What do we need? We need CO2 plus H2O. That's what plants need. So these will be the reactants right there. And precisely we need 6. We need 6 CO2 molecules, and we need 6 H2O or water molecules. And what gets made? What are the products? Well, plants, they make glucose, and its formula is C6H12O6, plus plants also make oxygen, or O2. And they happen to make, once again, 6 oxygen molecules. And these over here are the products. So here in red, these are the reactants. And over here in blue, those are the products. And that is what gets made during photosynthesis. So that is the chemical formula for photosynthesis. Definitely write it down. Yes, you will need to memorize it. And now the last slide. Here is our quiz on ATP and energy. Let's see how you do. All right. Now, I don't know how you did. Hopefully you got them all right. But here are the answers. ATP, this is number 1, stands for adenosine triphosphate. Remember, tri means 3, and ATP has 3 phosphate molecules. That's why it's called adenosine triphosphate. Number 2, energy is stored in the bonds between the phosphate. Energy is stored between the phosphate molecules in ATP. Number 3, when a cell uses energy, one of the phosphates gets ripped off, so ATP becomes ADP, adenosine diphosphate, because now it only has 2 phosphates and not 3. True or false? ATP is the only energy molecule in the cell. That is false. Because remember, we had NADH, FADH2, and also NADPH. And remember, those 3 molecules, what you need to know, they carry around electrons. Electrons, which can be used for energy. 5, list at least 2 things that can be used. The cell can use growth, movement. I'm not really worried about that. 6, the blank are what is needed in a chemical reaction, but the products are what gets made. So what is needed or what goes into a chemical reaction, remember those are the reactants. Reactants go in, products come out or what get made. The cell, number 7, the cell breaks down the sugar called, this would be glucose to make ATP energy. Extra credit number 1. What is the chemical reaction for photosynthesis or the chemical formula? Remember that is 6 H2O, 6 waters, plus 6 CO2s. Those are the reactants. What gets made? Glucose, C6H12O6, and plants also make 6 O2 or 6 oxygen molecules. And the last one, extra credit, plants also use ATP for cell energy. That is true. Plants also use ATP when their cells need energy. All right, thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll talk to you next time.